Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see so many of you here for today's webinar. Wow, it's incredible. So welcome for this webinar today. As I said, I'm very glad to see all of you. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon for all of you. My name is Tamiris, and today I will be hosting this webinar from Novatek International. It will be their first webinar together with the DCVMN as they join this year as a sponsor. So welcome, Ms. Ilona and Vivian Nisa for today's webinar. So the topic of our conversation today will be achieving both contamination control as per Annex 1 and digitalization of the environmental monitoring process. We will have a presentation of 45 minutes, which will be followed by a Q&A session of 15 minutes. And the webinar today will be conducted by Ms. Ilona Andish, and I will be introducing her in a bit. So if you encounter any technical difficulties, you can address to me in the chat. And for the questions, comments, concerns, you can add in the Q&A icon just on the bottom of your screen. After this webinar, Novatek International will evaluate if they can provide you with the presentation and the recording today. But don't worry, because I will be emailing all of you to give this information. So now I will not stay in between the speaker and the presentation. So let me introduce Ms. Ilona Andish. Ilona Andish, Bachelor of Computer Science, is the Associate Director of Product Innovations at Novatek International, with over 20 years of experience in regulated industries. Ilona works with clients, partners, regulatory agencies, consultants, and other experts worldwide to assist in improving quality processes. Ilona is involved with industry training, developing user requirements, performing process mapping, and identifying and managing new product innovations for quality control software. Ilona is active in the industry, giving presentations and performing pieces of training on topics related to digitalization, contamination control, quality management, cleaning validation, risk assessment, and other areas. Ilona was a trainer at the Parental Drug Association, PDA, TRI, for many years. So, Ms. Ilona, welcome for today's presentation, and please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time. So let's get started. So today, as Tamara said, we are just going to close this bar. Sorry. We are looking at the agenda here. We're going to talk about achieving both contamination control as per Annex 1 and digitalization of the environmental monitoring process. So to me, these two topics go hand in hand, because if you have the right technology for digital transformation or digitalization, you're going to be able to meet Annex 1 and other regulations more easily. So in fact, I would say pharma biotech industry used to lag behind other industries in digital transformation. But once the pandemic began, this industry quickly did turn to innovative digital technology to conduct their business remotely or virtually. And now we see several companies that are actually ahead of the curve. Dr. Manoj Raghunandan, President of Global Self-Care and Consumer Experience at Johnson & Johnson, stated that digital innovation has been accelerated by 10 years by what has happened over the course of the last 18 months. And this is even a statement from 2021, and there's been much progress in digital transformation since then. So let us first define the terms. I'm going to start on the bottom. Digitization is basically the transition from paper to digital. So this is maybe you're uploading your paper information into the computer. Digitalization, so there's actually two different words. Digitalization is to improve business processes by leveraging digital technologies. So this could mean maybe you're automating one part of the process, maybe you're bringing in a software or something like that. Digital transformation is to leverage and integrate technologies into all aspects of the business to create consumer employee experience and value. So I'll give you a little example from my personal life a little bit. So just not long ago, we went to Disney World with my family and my 6-year-old daughter. So I know Disney World, perhaps for some parents, it's like a magical place. For other parents, they call it more, it's like a torture. Anyways, for me, despite the lineups, the heat, and all the waiting, the walking, the experience was actually made quite enjoyable, and this was because of digital transformation. So first, they have these magic band bracelets that, in tech terms, it's called a wearable, and that these let you into the park, into some rides. You can pay with them, and it actually would light up as like a notification when something interesting was happening in the area. So my daughter was delighted by that. Their main app was really a lifesaver. It gave us the location of all the princesses, which we all had to go see, of course. We could see the restaurant menus, and we could also see in real time the wait times of all the rides, so that you could decide where to walk and stuff like that, because the park is very big. Then their second app was interacting with the surroundings inside lineups for gameplay. So I have to say that all this really brought the experience to the next level and made it enjoyable. But what does digital transformation look like in pharma environmental monitoring? It improves the efficiency and accuracy of the process, which leads to better compliance to regulations. It automates data collection, analysis, and trending, which can lead to faster, more accurate CAPA, reduction in contamination risk, and even faster product release. And I'm going to explain that one in a few slides. Some examples of digital transformation technologies in use today. So there is the Internet of Things, IoT, which is an integration to devices and equipment through their sensors to track readings in real time. So this allows us to be alerted by any discrepancies in real time and to make more rapid decisions. So one of its uses in shipping, for example, Pfizer used IoT technology to ensure that their COVID-19 vaccines, which had to be maintained at a specific temperature, that they reach their distribution centers and hospitals in time and without losing their potency. Artificial intelligence, AI, so that can be used to analyze large amounts of data and identify patterns that humans may not be able to detect. So in EM, this is actually perfect for data analysis, identifying trends, and even tracing the contamination to its source. The cloud. So the cloud has provided scalability and agility for organization to enable employees to collaborate and work easily from home, also to securely store and share data, and reduce the IT maintenance and resources needed. That one is a big point for the cloud that a lot of people are interested in. And another little story. My husband, who works with one of the primary banks in Canada, so I'm out of Canada, before the pandemic, he would assure me that there is no way that he could work from home. I would tell him, because he had a long commute to work, I said, work from home for sometimes. He said, no, it's impossible. Like, we're not set up that way. We don't have the technology, you know, I have to see people face to face. Anyway, so pandemic came, everybody worked from home in his company. Even still today, 4 out of 5 days, he's working from home and everything is functioning well at the bank. So when there's a need, there's a way. And then we have the environmental monitoring software. So that can tie many of these technologies together seamlessly through instrument connectivity, pulling the data from source points and using AI or other means to correlate and evaluate large data sets. the FDA has mentioned to me that computer trending for pattern recognition is the most efficient and effective way to handle such large quantities of data. Also, the PDA Technical Report 13, if you're familiar with it, which was revised in 2022, states that based on the large number of samples tested by a given facility, computer-based tracking system is essential. This company, Deloitte, did a survey with 150 biopharma companies in 2021, and they state digital innovation is a burning strategic priority. 77% of respondents say their organization views digital innovation as a competitive differentiator. And on the left side, you can see that in the areas of manufacturing, these are their planned, I cannot see the top because of the toolbar. These are their planned technologies in the next coming years in digital transformation. And we can see the IoT and AI, for example, are right on top there of the list. So just to tie it all together, and I really like this definition of digital transformation, or sometimes called digital innovation. It is moving away from isolated scientific instruments, manual data collection, and siloed databases to create an interconnected manufacturing ecosystem for fluid data tracking, sharing, review, and analysis. Now, to make this just more concrete for the environmental monitoring process. So now, imagine a system, excuse me, I'm just after a cold. Imagine a system that can manage sampling plans and locations based on contamination risk. So perhaps some kind of AI logic included for that. The system would connect to any handheld and continuous monitoring devices. Again, I apologize. So connect to any handheld continuous monitoring devices to upload this plan and do the collection and then download the information back into the system. For viable sampling, we could also automate the incubation process. It could connect to colony counting devices, perhaps, to read the results of the viable sampling into the system and connect to also microorganism identification systems that can read that information in. So throughout this process, be also alerted, or actually the system provide automatically any notifications in real time if there is something happening, like an interrupted run, maybe some discrepancy, an excursion, if the incubation is completed and the samples need to be transferred or pulled out. If a microorganism if a microorganism, for example, comes back as objectionable, and so on and so forth. Now, once all the information is in the system, the ability to also do the trending in real time, pattern recognition, root cause analysis, these tools like that. And wouldn't it also be nice if the system emailed you your periodic reports, like your monthly and quarterly reports that you need for environmental process, and all this inside a system that is fully compliant to 21 CFR Part 11 regulations, Data Integrity, Annex 1, or any other necessary regulations. So in fact, much of this technology already does exist today, and we'll look at some more concrete examples. So examples of digitalization in the EM process. So I made a list here for you, but today we're going to focus mainly on the sampling in real time and also on the sample reconciliation. And the integration to devices as well. So cloud data segregation and visibility. So with an implementation across sites, you gain visibility. You also can control who has access to what data. And this leads to certain benefits of harmonization across the sites, compliance at a global level, and identifying and supporting those sites that perhaps are doing less well than others. Here I want to emphasize the importance of digitalizing the complete EM process and not just parts of it. And one example from my experience is one common example that companies would purchase, let's say, an EM trending software, but they would not automate the sampling and data acquisition part. And the reason they wouldn't, is that there is an additional investment for that. You would have to buy maybe some of the hardware, tablets, barcode scanners. You may also have to train additional group of people, like the production people who are doing the sampling. And so again, buy additional licenses for them. So there is an investment, but not doing so results in the consequence of the production people doing the sampling on paper, then the microbiology people that would transcribe all the data into the system. Now, for a company that handles multiple batches in one day, this is significant. This could result in this task is very redundant, error prone, and very time consuming. It also often leads to the micro people not having enough time to compile the EM reports or batch release reports on time. And then this delays the batch release process. So this is what I meant earlier when I mentioned that digitalizing your process can actually lead to faster batch release. Well, this is an example of that. Now, how do we digitalize the sampling process? So we'll talk about it first without the equipment, then we'll add the equipment in. So for viable sampling, let's say. So normally you might have some kind of device or like a tablet like this that you bring into a clean room environment. Or perhaps it's already stationary there, that's fine. You load your samples on it and then you scan to sample. By scanning the media plate, you are tracking in the EM software the chain of custody information of the sample during that sampling process. Another point is also to maintain the importance of maintaining data integrity during this process. And a nice feature is also that if the system can also notify you if you're forgetting any samples. So you could get this notification while you're still on the shop floor and do something about it rather than having missed samples later on. So when you scan the media plate, this is some of the information that is automatically logged, that can be logged in by the system. For example, media used, equipment used, sample status as taken, the people that are setting out and collecting the plates, comments, sampling start time, end time, product lot number, etc. So sampling in real time should also have the ability to track and update your media inventory. So as you're scanning and sampling, automatically in real time, update the quantities and the status. Ability to also track growth promotion of the media so that you can have everything in one compliant system. Ability to either print barcode labels and affix them on the plates, and then you would scan to collect the plates, or instead of printing the labels, scan the label that is already on the plate from the media manufacturer. So you would scan to start the sampling and scan to collect. And here what's important is that when you're scanning the plate, that the system recognizes that sample and puts the information, links it correctly to the right sample inside the system. And also, a good feature is to prevent the use of any incorrect media, like if it's expired, if it's in quarantine, or if you scanned it already. So if you scanned it twice, let's say by accident. So the system should give a sort of like a pop-up notification or something to alert you in real time again as you're scanning. ability to scan a group barcode for bulk operations. So that could be very useful in sampling process or even in incubation process. So imagine you have, let's say, 100 plates on the card going into incubation. Now, instead of scanning these 100 plates, so 100 times you're scanning to log that it's going into incubation, you associate these 100 plates to one group barcode, and then you just scan that one barcode and log that these 100 plates went into the incubator. The system then can give you a notification to tell you, okay, now it's time to transfer the samples, and you scan again one barcode to log that they're now in the second incubator. And then another notification to pull them out, and you scan to say that now they're out of the incubation. So back to the sampling process, important to use high performance and quality hardware for clean reviews. So we have to introduce some hardware in that case, but at the same time, we want to ensure that this hardware doesn't introduce any additional contamination. And so actually minimal physical interaction with the tablets is key. And second, we also want to make sure, like I said, that data integrity is well maintained during this process too. And so, for example, when you're loading the samples onto the device, they are locked onto you as a user. So no other user can access them or edit them, I would say, the same exact samples at the same time. Another feature is the offline feature. So by data integrity, the system should track, all the operations should be tracked contemporaneously, even if there's no Wi-Fi. So the offline feature allows this to happen. So even if you're in a corner of the room where Wi-Fi doesn't reach, still all the operations are tracked contemporaneously. The autosave feature also autosaves all the operations throughout your one open session and requires only one password entry at the end of the session, because entering your password is a lot of touches to the device. And sometimes the number of touches could mean contamination. So we want to reduce them as much as possible. So then it takes that electronic signature and links it to all the operations that were done in that one open session. So this quite a bit reduces the number of touches. So now let's add the equipment. Integration to equipment and instruments is actually an important part of digitalization, because in certain cases, you can directly bring in results and you have them at the ready in the system faster for trend analysis, and you get notified faster if there's any discrepancy and so on and so forth. Here we're going to talk about the air sampler and particle counter device as an example. So instead of going to each device and programming the location on it, you could just upload the sample plan from the system. Then you go ahead and do your collection, do your sampling and so on, and you download the data back into the system. Like I said, the operation is tracking all the chain of custody data and alerts the user if any discrepancy was found, like an interrupted run. The system should also, again, recognize what you're downloading and what sample it should link it to. And a nice feature is also to have the ability to download the information in bulk from perhaps multiple instruments at once. The integration can be to equipment can be extended to continuous monitoring systems, which are in fact an example of IoT technology. So these systems normally track particle counts, temperature, humidity, pressure, and so on, and connect to sensors to read the data in. So it reads in actually a very high amount of data and at a high frequency, like every few minutes or every few seconds even. So a system should have the ability to take in this huge amount of data and know what to do with it, and at this high frequency. A nice feature I see is also the ability to provide specially scaled graphs to be able to see this information on a chart. So normally the graphs you will be able to see, typical graph you will be able to see across a few days, weeks, months, maybe a year. But here you need to also zoom in a little more than that because the data is coming in at such a high frequency. So for example, this graph here, we can see in green, the 0.5 micron, and in red, the 5.0 micron. And the whole graph is across just 3 days. And then here we zoomed in even more, and we can see the graph is across 1 minute. So this is only 1 minute. And I can actually see where it's breaching the action level here because I'm able to zoom in like that. And then this is just a quick example of the temperature and humidity, but it's pretty stable. We don't see any discrepancies here. Okay, so we've reviewed the process of sampling, incubation, and data entry through data acquisition. So now your boss or the FDA isn't going to tap you on your back and say, good job, you recovered 99% of your samples. And they will say, what happened to that one sample you missed, right? So it's now digitalization should really actually ensure that you don't miss any samples, but it's always prudent to incorporate some verification checks, maybe a quick little daily check or a weekly check, something like that. Yeah. And so in the system, you're able to filter across the day or the week or the month, let's say last month, if you want to do that. And even by area, different type of samples and such. And you could see in different color the notifications, if the samples were taken, if some of them are still pending, if they could not be taken, then you have the notifications for the incubation process. Apologies, I had to blur part of it for proprietary reasons, but there are some notifications for incubation, when it's ready and so on, and even when the sample is completed and needs a review and approval. So I hope you've been enjoying so far my little cartoons. I do like them. I hope this doesn't happen to anybody. But the point is, I want to say, to conclude with the digital transformation part, is that it can really save you significant amounts of time. So now we jump to discussing Annex 1. So Annex 1, of course, discusses contamination control strategy. So here it states it's used to monitor the controls designed to minimize the risk of microbial particle contamination. EM data and trend data should be reviewed as part of product batch release. Written procedure should describe actions to take if something is found out of trend or exceeding the established limits. So this version of Annex 1 actually focuses quite a bit on trending. Trending is mentioned 22 times in this revision in comparison to the previous revision, where it was only mentioned once. So in this case, digitalization in form of an environmental monitoring trending system can greatly assist. So the quantity and quality of data found in the environmental monitoring process is quite enormous, even for a small company. And correlating all this data together can be quite challenging. This is just a partial list of considerations for contamination right here. So one thing is that we want to make sure is that we're able to trend across all parameters to make sure that there is no blind spots and that we are looking across all the data. And ways to use the trending, preventive trending across all elements, and to identify adverse trends, routine trending for product release state of control, investigational and post-corrective trending. What is an adverse trend? So regulatory agencies don't really give much of a concrete definition. Annex 1 does mention an example. They say a number of events or individual events that indicate a deterioration of environmental control. So I find that typically companies will create their own definition for their own process of adverse trend. And I included two examples here for you in case you want to look at them. I'm going to read out the last one. So this client definition is 3 or more consecutive points, drifts, or pattern, or 3 or more clusters of recoveries in one day in one room above the alert level. So for them, that's an adverse trend. Alternatively, an increase in frequency of recovery in a short period. Okay, so that's just an example for you. So now we can go over a few Annex 1 points, and we can see how an EM trending software can assist with these. So this one is both viable and total particle alert levels should be established and reviewed periodically based on ongoing trend data. So a good feature in a EM trending system is the ability to provide you with these different type of distribution graphs, which also provides certain calculations. Like this is a Weibull graph that provides a calculation of the 95th and 99th percentile. That could be used to assess your alert limits with. Now, it depends on your data set, what type of graph you would use. There are different graphs available like Poisson, normal, Weibull, 99% quantile, and so on and so forth. But essentially, it should allow you to filter across your data, let's say from the past year or 2 years, view that on the distribution graph, and based on these calculations, you can decide if you want to use those to help you adjust your alert limits with. This point, monitoring procedures should define the approach to trending. Trends should include, but are not limited to, increasing numbers of excursions from action limits or alert levels. So of course, this is easier to see on a graph visually. So I do like the trending for this to see if your excursions are increasing. It should plot the data across time and should have the ability to filter by many parameters. Like here, we're filtering on ISO 5 area, passive air, and you should be able to see your alert action levels on the graphs. So here we can see clearly that it is increasing. Trends should include consecutive excursions from alert levels. In this case, there's a rule that's built in here that actually tracks consecutive alerts. And on the last consecutive alert, you could plug in the numbers that you want. So here we have 3 alerts. On the last alert, the system gives you an action notification. So this is a caller and email notification. Also, it's useful to visualize your counts and excursions, well, on a trend, but also on a map, like here. The trend can give you certain information, and I find that the map can give you, it is visually different. So for some people, it's good to have different tools at your disposition to see the information from different angles and in different ways. That way you can better identify a pattern that is happening, if there's one happening. So in this case, the map can display any counts that are within spec or alerts actions on the map itself, the picture of the map, and as well as those consecutive excursions from alerts. It has a specific color as well. Alternatively, you may also want to look at a graph like this of just your excursions and details about each excursion. So often, regulatory agencies will ask questions like, what was found here in this time frame? How many excursions you had? How did you deal with them? What impact did that have? And so on and so forth. So it's good to have these reports kind of at your fingertips to be able to pull up the information and show, and rather than to be digging around through binders. So here with this report, you're able to filter across many different parameters. So we're looking at an area of 5 rooms for the year 2019. And we can see the alert and actions on this graph, what we had by each month. And the table calculates the alert rate and the action rate on the bottom. that's also useful, especially maybe the alert rate is useful as a preventive measure to see if it's increasing across the months, or maybe you have a baseline alert rate established and you want to see if it's deviating from that baseline. Okay, so at this point, there should be systems in place for disqualification of personnel from working if something happens, like an identification of an adverse trend from personnel monitoring, for instance. So the same type of tools should be available for personnel monitoring. The system should have the ability to track personnel monitoring really well. And so there are some companies that like to review their personnel monitoring counts individually, by individual, I would say. So we could see that on the graph here. We could see the count for each person that was monitored. But other companies do like to use this cumulative count. So they will kind of add up from all the people in the room and see a cumulative count for that day for the room. So again, the system should have different tools at your disposition to be able to do what you need to do. Microorganisms detected in the grade AB areas should be identified to species level. Consideration taken to those difficult to control, such as spore forming or mold. So here we could integrate with micro identification device like Vitek or others to bring in the microorganism information into the system, or we could type it in. And so you would have track the information like the genus, species, strain, gram stain. And what's interesting, it tracks also a category, which is exactly for the purpose that mentions this Annex 1 point, to track if it's a spore forming, mold, yeast, if it's normal, notable, or biofilm forming. So these are some of the categories. And then you have all this information available that you can then trend with. So for instance, you may review this pie chart, and perhaps you just want to see what species you have across your facility. So you may review, you may filter for the date range you want, the areas you want, the type of samples you want, and you can see the list of species. You can identify your top 10 or your top 25 like that. Or in this case, what we're showing on the screen is by those categories. So I could also see in that year 2022 that I'm filtering across my whole plant, the categories that were found. And I could see my largest category is the spore former. So if I know that information, I can go better, do my root cause analysis perhaps a little bit better of why I have, let's say, this many, organisms that are spore forming. I can go look at the trends, and for something specific, I can trend and filter for something specific to give me a better understanding of what is going on. So that's what we're doing here in this example. And there is an Annex 1 point also here mentioning trends should include changes in microbial flora type and numbers of and predominance of specific organisms. So we could again view the trend either by the categories or the species or other information. Here we're looking at the species. So the trend plots the counts that were found in a grade B area in the months of April and June. So it's across time. And we can see a couple of higher counts here. And we can see in different colors the species that are associated with the data. Okay, so that's an example of what you can do. Then you can go back and filter on something else for the same data set to do your root cause analysis. Perhaps who was in the room on that day, or that time frame, because we're looking at April to June. What equipment was used, what shift was involved, and so on and so forth, to try to identify a pattern. Annex 1 point, the information from these systems should be used for routine batch certification release and periodic assessment. Again, have the necessary trends and reports at your fingertips. So in this case, we're looking at a report And this is a pretty flexible report in the system. You can actually build it by setting the columns that you want, and then you filter on what you want. So it can be used for a lot of things, this report. But here we're using it for as a batch release report. So we filtered specifically on lot 108 and want to see all the samples that were done in relation to lot 108. And I have the results in here from the sampling as well. So the system actually looks in the background, the system looks at all the samples and identifies if they are all approved or not. If they are all approved, it puts a statement here to say all data in this report is approved. And also, it does identify if any of the results are excursions, it does put little stars around them. Finally, at the end of the report, you have a summary of tests table, which actually a lot of companies are doing this in their reporting these days, which basically looks at all the samples and counts the number of zeros, positive alerts, actions, and valid results. And it provides the rate, like the rate of the alert and action again here. Okay, all nonconformities such as sterility, test failures, environmental monitoring, excursions, deviations should be adequately investigated. Apologies. So in the system, there should be, of course, logic included for root cause analysis and some investigative work, which there is. We saw already some examples of that. However, it would be good if also you could log and track the investigation itself, either in the system or maybe the system can integrate with another investigation management system that is done there. Because if I pull out my batch release report from EM system or another type of report, I may want to see the investigation number there. And if I'm in my investigation management system and I'm looking at this investigation, I may want to easily click to see the result, to have that traceability to the EM result. So this is good if there is some kind of integration like that, or it's all included in the EM system. The investigation should determine the potential impact upon the process product and if any other batches are potentially impacted. So again, we can use the trending for this or some certain reports. And in this example, we're trending our data, our variable sampling across time again here. Excuse me. We can see quite a bit that are out of action. And the data is in different colors. Our counts are in different colors to show us the lots that were manufactured around the same time. And if, for example, I was doing, let's say on this day, April 28th, I was doing an investigation why this is such a high count. And I'm looking to see this is lot 104. I would expand the date range before and even after if I had any data. And I'd want to see what are some of the batches around that date as well that could be potentially impacted, right? That's the Annex 1.7. So elements to be considered within a contamination control strategy should include trend analysis, detailed investigation, root cause determination, CAPA, continuous improvement. So we kind of talked about several of these points already, but essentially, as we said, a good trending software is kind of indispensable to achieve all of that really well. It should allow for continuous monitoring, trending in real time, and have the ability to filter across many different parameters to be able to see your data from different angles. Here, I want to mention the importance of rapid access to your trends, because if you're doing your routine monitoring across different classification and rooms and so on, or even if you're doing your investigational monitoring, you may have to look at a number of graphs to really have all your information. And so what's nice here is that we're able to filter, let's say, just for our viable samples in this example, and at a specific date range, like a time frame. And then the system automatically splits up the data on the left side by classification and type of sample. Excuse me. So I could now click on each one, for example, grade A air sample, and see the graph. Then I could just click grade A settle plate and see the graph, and then grade B, and so on and so forth, rather than going back and filtering for that data set. So this actually can save significant amounts of time, give you that ability to really rapidly review your routine monitoring. So it gives you the ability to do this more often, which is what, you know, kind of we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to review our trends only every quarter. That some companies are still doing that because they don't have the resources or the tools available. So with this, it's made more easy. Importance of filtering by different parameters, like by operator, species, equipment, lot number, shift, and so we saw already a lot of these. And again, if I filter here by equipment that was used, my air sampling equipment, it'll split it up on the left side. So I could see the data just from equipment A, and then just from equipment B, or I could see all the data together for all the equipment, and then they're identified in different colors like that. And in certain situations, you may need different type of graphs to really depict that situation properly. Like for non-zero data, like particle count data, it's very useful to do linear regression trending, like you see here. So the middle line is a linear regression line. And the data points here are in different colors because, again, we're looking at equipment, but this time from particle counting for the 0.5 micron. And I could also split that up to see, let's say, a regression line separate for each equipment. And then I could be looking at the slope of the line to see, is it going up towards the levels or is it stable? And that could also perhaps be an indication of an adverse trend. So like here as an example, this red one is increasing, sloping upward. In Annex 1, there are also several points in regards to utility monitoring, like high-risk utilities should be subject to regular trend analysis. Chemical microbial monitoring of water systems should be performed. Alert level excursions documented. Adverse trend tracking, action limit excursions should be investigated and determine probable root causes. When gases are used, microbial monitoring of the gas should be performed. So there's quite a few points in regarding that. So any good EM system should also include your utility monitoring. And the utility monitoring process is a little bit different, so it should cater to that. It should track all the different type of utilities like water, clean steam, compressed gas, even perhaps HVAC qualification. So that would be nice as well. So everything is in one system. And again, provide the different trends reports needed for this type of process. So here we see an example of a certificate of compliance report for purified water and the chemicals tests done on it. At the same time, have the ability to plot that on a map too. In this case, we may want to put a map of either of the rooms or of a suite of rooms, or it could be the loop like this and identify the ports and so on the map, and then see the different data, whether it's within specification or out of specification to have that visibility. And of course, the trending tools as well. Here we're looking at examples of a few different tests that were done, TOC, conductivity, etc. And we could see each test separately with their limits as well if needed. So I'd like to mention the benefits of using a process-based system. This means a system that is created specifically for the EM process and not created for another purpose, like a LIMS that you're trying to do EM with it. I've seen several such projects fail, unfortunately. Here's an example of a few benefits of process-based systems. For example, reduction of data integrity issues. They're ready for business. They're off the shelf, so you can kind of implement them very quickly, start your ROI. Easy to integrate with the existing information infrastructure. But the two biggest benefits, I would say, is the vendor is abreast of industry needs and regulations and updates the system to meet best practices. So it's the vendor that updates the systems accordingly, rather than the company using the system having to customize the system. They could just buy the upgrade at this case, and it's much easier and much less costly. And the other benefit, I would say, is that these process-based systems usually include a very good trending tool. And that is something that you will not find in a LIMS. So last Annex 1 point, contamination control, they say is done across different facets like microbial, endotoxin, pyrogen, particle, and so on. And these are typically assessed, controlled individually, but their collective effectiveness should be considered together. So although we focus today on environmental monitoring, this should by no means be a silo process. Digital transformation, can involve automating parts, but then you want to tie it all together into the big picture of your contamination control strategy. Thank you very much. Thank you, and pass it back to you, Tamara.
Thank you, Ms. Ilona, for this wonderful presentation. We have a high number of attendees here. I'm pretty sure that everyone have enjoyed as much as I did. It's a very important content, of course, for vaccine manufacturers here. So I would like to invite everyone to pose the questions in the Q&A icon or in the chat. I have seen a comment from an attendee, but I don't know if it's well formulated, but there is a comment in the chat regarding in process to transform into digitalization. It came up when you were presenting one of the slides, so maybe we would like the attendee to maybe reformulate the question so that Ms. Ilona can be commenting on this. But in the meantime, that the attendees are thinking and writing the questions, I will come up with some questions that might be from the interest of our members. And the first question is, does the system also provide calculations of recovery rates?
Recovery rates, yes. So this system provides special reports for that. Recovery rates as per USB guidance 1116. Which is tracking specific ISO levels and specific categories of testing, like active air, passive air, and so on. So the system, basically, you're able to filter and review specific reports which show you the recovery rates, and you can get out the recovery rates of daily monitoring for each of the categories, or by room, by person, or even the monthly rates, the quarterly rates, and even the annual rates. And there is one interesting report that depicts the rates across 3 years of data and all the quarters. So you could actually look at it and see if you have any, it can help identify if you have any seasonal variations by looking at the rates across time like that.
It's good to know that it can be customized and personalized, and I think this is something that all the members are looking for as well, to have more personalized service. So we have some questions here from the Q&A session. So we have a question from Hayazan. And the question is, what is the strategy to be followed for bioburden testing of raw materials?
So bioburden testing of raw materials. So really in this presentation, we were focusing more on environmental monitoring. Bioburden testing, although part of the microbiology team, I would say normally would be tracked as part of the raw material testing. that you are doing, even though it is done by the microbiology team, because in the raw material testing, it needs to be included in when you're releasing the batch as part of the release reports, like the certificate of analysis reports, normally needs to be included there. So I would say that if you're looking for systems, the environmental monitoring system is, let's say, one, and then you have like your LIMS system that would more track, I would say, that raw material information. But they could be connected together, of course. So digitalization is should really digital transformation. The point is that it's across the company. So, that would tie all those pieces together.
Thank you, Ilona. Thank you, Raisa, for the question. So we have questions in the chat and the Q&A session. So I will focus first on the Q&A and then we'll go to the chat. The second question is from an anonymous attendee, and the question is, does the system allow to enter the monitoring state, such as at rest and in operation?
Yes. So actually, you're able to specify that when you're building your sampling plan and your specifications. You can specify if you have different frequency of monitoring and different specification when your room is at rest or in production. And then when you are scheduling your sampling, at the point that you're scheduling your sampling, you're going to say, let's say for the next month, my room is at rest. Schedule the sampling according to the specification and frequency at rest. And then when it's in production, you can schedule it according to that. So the specifications are tracked correctly accordingly. You can also, for each sample, it's identified if the sample was during at rest or in production as well. And actually, you can even trend by that. You can trend samples at rest versus samples in production too.
Thank you very much. So the next question is related to the trend, as I said. What is the statistical tool that you recommend to analyze trends?
Statistical tool, I mean, different systems may have different things, but for environmental monitoring, I would say it's important just to, I wouldn't say there's a specific tool, but the important thing is, I would say that you're able to trend across different parameters. And if to analyze the actual trends, that now you have the trends and you want to analyze them, at this point, I'm not aware that there is any kind of like tool for that, because that would be more like artificial intelligence at this point. So I don't think there is really anything yet, but AI is really coming to the pharma industry. I have spoken to some experts about it, and it is really coming. It is maybe in certain areas in its infancy, but so I'm not aware of any tool that it analyzes the trends for you. Right now, it's the user that would need to look at the trends to determine their analysis.
Thank you. So let's move on because we have a lot of questions. I will go now to the chat. There is a question from Hassan Zafar, and the question is, it only provides the tracking of the plate, or is there any tracking of CFU in the plate as a result is easily manipulated?
So the system would track the plate and the results as well. You may use the technology to do that sampling in real time that we talked about. If it's a particle count test, then that can read the result, the particle count result directly from the instrument into the system. If it's a viable sample, either the user can incubate and then type in the result in the system, or potentially also connect to colony counting devices if you have one, to read the result in. But of course, all the results are tracked in the system so that you can trend them.
Thank you. A second question from the chat. Hi, Gautam from Zydos. Hello, Gautam. Is the system able to integrate for water monitoring like TOC? What is the privilege right matrix of system like analyst, reveal, HOD, admin, etc.? And third question, table used in grade A area able to be sanitized, I think is the word, or not?
Oh, okay. I think I got the questions. Okay, so this system does manage both environmental and utility monitoring. Yes, so absolutely you can set up your utility monitoring, the type of utilities you have, the grade of utilities, the loop ports, and all the testing like TOC is managed there with if you have minimum, maximum ranges, you can all put that in as your specifications. And then you have all the trends and all that. The other question was, the second one was in regards to the user access rights, right? So yes, you can build different user access rights in the system, and it's up to you how you want to build it. So it's up to the company to define the user levels and what access each level has. So you can build one for analyst, one for admin as you need. And then I think you mentioned that the tablet can be sanitized for clean room use, grade A.
Yes.
So with this particular system, we can make a recommendation for certain brand of tablet, but you can also choose your own. And so it is your responsibility to make sure you can bring it to grade A area. The one that we recommend can be sanitized and brought into the grade A area, yes. But there are companies that choose to do that and companies that choose to say, we're just going to use it in grade B, C, D area. So that's really going to be up to you.
Okay, so I'll go back to the Q&A session. Ladies and gentlemen, the time is already over, but we can still some more minutes. If any of you cannot stay longer, we understand. But let's continue here. We have a question. How do we handle objectionable organisms in environmental monitoring?
So actually in this system, you have, when you are identifying the microorganism, you can check a box that says if it's objectionable. So user would have to check the box. The user has to say this is objectionable, but then you have a notification. It puts it as an action and you have a special notification and even a special email notification that is sent to say that you have objectionable organisms. And then you have the ability to view that on the pie chart. You can trend by objectionable versus not objectionable. So then you do your analysis based on that. Okay.
Thank you. So going back to the chat, thank you for the very useful information. Narishma said, can AI be considered in GMP areas?
Yes, absolutely. It is already here. It is already in use. I think in certain things, certain areas. So it is really coming. I have heard from the experts that I was actually surprised. I was at a meeting regarding this. I was actually surprised how advanced it is now already, but there is still a lot of work to do absolutely for that. They were mentioning that you have to really train the AI so that it actually does its job, and it's not easy to do that. So maybe a few more years, I would say.
Wonderful. Mahesh said, thank you for the useful presentation. Thank you, Mahesh, for being here. So the next question from the chat is, system AI is able to detect adverse trend?
Again, the system right now at this moment doesn't have this kind of AI technology yet to tell you, let's say, here, this is an adverse trend. First of all, as you saw from my presentation, an adverse trend could have different definitions. even the regulatory agency doesn't give a definition. So each company decides their own definition of adverse trends. So this is why there is no AI for this yet, because it's difficult to build, because there is not one definition according to it. If we had that one definition, we could build it. So right now, it's the tools are there for the user to evaluate themselves. So they would look at the trends and they would have their own definition, and based on that, look at certain pieces of information and determine that.
Thank you. So let's go quickly to a few more questions. The question from Hassan, it only provides a tracking of the plate, or is there any tracking? I think this question we already responded in the chat. Is that okay, Hassan? Because it was the same question, so we'll just mark it as done. The next question from Yarl Largada, best tools for establishing alert levels of EM.
Establishing alert levels would be, I would say, the distribution graphs, like normal distribution, Weibull distribution, Poisson, negative binomial, 99% quantile. Those are all type of distribution graphs that you would need to assess your alert levels. And it's up to you to figure out kind of which type of graph fits your data set. So for certain data sets, you may use different graphs, like for grade A areas where there's a lot of zero values, normally the Weibull graph could be used. But for areas where there isn't a lot of zeros, then the normal distribution would be used. And so those are just some examples.
Thank you. So the next question from Pradeep, can the limit be established for trending?
Don't know exactly what this means, but I mean, in the system, yes, okay, because we didn't talk about the sampling plans really. Yes, in the system, you build sampling plans, you build all the tasks that you need to do with locations and your specifications, so you can establish the alert level, action level, and for water analysis or utilities, like the minimum, maximum ranges. So all that is established, yes, and you trend against that. That's how the system will know if there are excursions.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we will take one more question, but the other questions, I will kindly ask Ms. Ilona to emailing all of you. I mean, I think everyone will be interested in the responses too. So I will take one more question, but don't worry, because these questions will be collected and we will be sending the responses. So a last question from here is from Narashma, and the question is, can AI be considered in good manufacturing practices?
We did that one already.
Oh, that's true. I'm sorry. So another question from Ryazan, is there any automatic colony counting for viable monitoring?
Yes, the colony counters, there are some available already, colony counters. So you can research that, the devices for that, and then a system like a trending system like this one could connect to the colony counter devices and read that result and read that result into the system.
Okay, wonderful. Maybe one last question. Any advice on automation of colony counting, prove and approve the manufacturers? In more specific. Yeah.
Can you repeat that?
Any advice on automation of colony counting? And there is another sentence, prove and approved manufacturers.
Oh, okay. The devices for colony counting, I do not know them off the top of my head. So maybe this is something that if you email me, I could look it up and send you information. Okay, I see what you're asking. You're asking, and if there are any colony devices that we recommend that are like approved manufacturers. Okay, so I think email me on that one if it's okay, and I will look that up for you.
So thank you very much. I can see everyone is so interested in these questions, but hopefully your company can, of course, answer them on email, but also have another webinar or workshop more, longer so that we can discuss it further. So don't worry, I will emailing all of you with the responses of these questions as soon as possible. But first, I would like to thank you, Ms. Ilana, for this wonderful and very informative session. As one of our attendees said in the chat, thanks for this wonderful session, very informative indeed. So thank you everyone for joining today. I hope you join in our next webinar next week. And in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to Ms. Ilona and myself if you have any questions. And I hope you have a nice weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.